the man who had his fingerprints removed, Alvin Creepy Karpis. Howdy everyone, my imaginary friend, Dead Bunny, is going to bring this exciting historical story to you today.
Hello. Alvin started his criminal career very early. At just 10 years old, he was selling pornography and surrounded by pimps, gamblers, and bootleggers. The turning point in his criminal career came with the Barker Gang alliance. Alvin Karpis' story is studded with bank and train robberies and two of the most incredible kidnappings in American history. If you want to find out more about Alvin Karpis, follow me and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Albin Francis Karpavičius, known as Alvin Francis Karpis, was born August 10, 1907 to Lithuanian immigrants Jonas and Ona Karpavičius in Montreal, Quebec, and was raised in Topeka, Kansas. His nickname Creepy was given to him for his sinister smile, but his gang members called him Ray. He was arrested for the first time in 1926 for burglary and was sentenced to 10 years at the State Industrial Reformatory in Hutchinson, Kansas. He escaped with another inmate, Lawrence Duvall, and went on a year-long crime spree, interrupted briefly while he lived with his parents after Duvall was arrested. After moving to Kansas City, Missouri, he was caught stealing a car and sent back to the reformatory. Transferred to the Kansas State Penitentiary in Lansing, he met Fred Barker, and this was the most decisive encounter of his life. Fred Barker was already a famous criminal and a member of the Bloody Barkers, as the newspapers of the time had called the Barkers. Who were the Barkers? The Barker family included the brothers Herman, Lloyd, Arthur or Doc, and Fred, the sons of Ma Barker, Arizona Barker, as well as Ari Barker. She wasn't a criminal herself, but badgered parole boards, wardens, and governors for the release of her boys when they were incarcerated. Growing up impoverished in a sharecropping family, all the boys soon turned into hardened criminals, robbing banks and killing without provocation. His gang was initially involved in bank robberies, but soon found kidnapping to be a more lucrative prospect. Their life was not easy, and for each of them there was a different epilogue. Doc was sentenced to life in prison in 1920 after murdering a night watchman. Herman committed suicide on August 29, 1927 after being badly injured in a shootout with police in Wichita, Kansas. Lloyd was sentenced to 25 years in 1922 for mail theft and released in 1938. After Alvin was released in 1931, he joined up with Fred Barker in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was the beginning of the Barker Karpis gang, one of the most formidable criminal gangs of the 1930s. After several robberies in 1933, they planned their first kidnapping. It was a warm summer evening. William A. Ham, Jr., president of the Theodore Ham Brewing Company, exited the building where he was working, and he was grabbed by four shadowy figures, all members of the Barker Karpis gang, and forced into the back of a car. Ham was taken to Wisconsin, where he was forced to sign 4 ransom notes. The ransom demanded was over $100,000. Then he was moved to a hideout in Bensenville, Illinois, where he was held prisoner until the kidnappers had been paid. Once the money was handed over, Ham was released near Wyoming, Minnesota. On September 6, 1933, using a then state-of-the-art technology, now called latent fingerprint identification, the FBI identified the fingerprints of Alvin Karpis, Arthur Doc Barker, Charles Fitzgerald, and the other members of the gang on the ransom notes. Even though the kidnappers were now far away, fingerprints were taken with the silver nitrate method for the first time in history, and investigators now knew who was hiding behind the kidnapping. The second kidnapping of the Barker Karpis gang targeted a wealthy banker named Edward George Bremer Jr., who was snatched in St. Paul, Minnesota on January 17, 1934. The father of the kidnapped Edward Bremer was a friend of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Bremer was released 3 weeks later after his family paid $200,000 in ransom. Although he couldn't identify the culprits, Bremer provided many clues. A key break came when the fingerprint of Arthur Doc turned up on an empty gas can found by a local police officer along the kidnapping route. Soon, a number of Barker's Confederates, including his brother Fred Karpis, Henry Campbell, Fred Goetz, Russell Gibson, Volney Davis, and others were linked to the crime. The gang split up after the Bremer kidnapping and began crisscrossing the country, with some of their members even fleeing to Cuba. It was during this time that Alvin Karpis decided with 2 other gang members to undergo plastic surgery to conceal their fingerprints and identities. In late September 1934, Fred Barker, his mother, and Campbell registered under fake names at the El Commodore Hotel in Miami. When Fred asked for a quiet place to live, the hotel manager told him of a friend's cottage for rent on the nearby Lake Weir. The Barkers moved there in November. In December, Doc Barker was tracked by Bureau investigators and was arrested in January. Later that night, several associates of Russell Gibson were also apprehended. Heavily armed and wearing a bulletproof vest, Gibson tried to fight it out but was mortally wounded. Searching the apartment, agents found, among powerful firearms and loads of ammunition, a map of Florida with Lake Weir circled. Investigators soon located Fred Barker's cottage. On January 16, 1935, at the first light of dawn, a group of agents surrounded the house and demanded the Barkers surrender. No response. They waited 15 minutes and called again. No answer. Following another call for surrender and more silence, agents shot tear gas grenades at the windows of the house. Someone in the house shouted, "All right, go ahead." Then machine gun fire blasted from the upstairs window. The gunfight went on until 10:30 in the morning. When the lake was completely calm again, Fred and his mother's bodies were found lifeless. Karpis continued his crimes with others, but had to stay on the move more than ever, as he became the last remaining of the FBI's public enemies #1. He did manage to pull off a crime that echoed the times of the Old West, a train robbery in Garrettsville, Ohio, which netted $27,000. On May 1st, 1936, the FBI located Karpis in New Orleans. A dozen or so agents swarmed over Karpis' car. J. Edgar Hoover, director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, announced to Karpis that he was under arrest. A couple of versions of the arrest are reported. Karpis' version of the story told in his memoirs was that Hoover came out only after all the other agents had him seized. Only then did the agents call to Hoover that it was safe to approach the car. The official FBI version states that Hoover reached into the car and grabbed Karpis before he could reach a rifle in the back seat. In fact, the car, a Plymouth Coupe, had no back seat. The whole fiasco was further aggravated when Hoover told his men to put the handcuffs on him. Not one agent had brought handcuffs, as federal agents had planned on killing Karpis, as they had the other public enemies. Karpis was tied up with a necktie removed from an agent's neck. Karpis was given a life sentence and taken to the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, where he lived for the next 27 years. The capture of Karpis essentially ended the age of the big-name Depression-era criminals. What do you think about this period and its legendary criminals? What do you think about the daring arrest of Karpis? Leave a comment now. Your opinion matters.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't, press thumbs down twice, just to be sure. Take it easy. Peace. Oh, by the way, I'm an alien. But not that kind of alien.
Get him.